The story begins with the shocking discovery that set a tiny town on a 51-year search for the truth, focusing immediately on the victim and the profound injustice of her sudden disappearance. The scene is set with a powerful, immediate image to grab the audience. On November 16, 1957, the quiet routine of Carlinville, Illinois, was violently broken. The victim's car was the first clue, a haunting presence on the shoulder of County Road 12. Her powder blue 54 Chevrolet Bel Air sat angled across the dark dirt shoulder. The engine was still running, headlights cutting through the November fog, like two pale eyes staring at nothing. The driver's door hung wide open. The radio played softly, a big band number from a distant Chicago station, fading in and out with static. Everything looked perfectly normal, but the driver, Lena Rodriguez, was gone. Her car was still running when they found it, headlights cutting through the November fog, like two pale eyes staring at nothing. The driver's door hung open. The radio played softly, some big band number from Chicago station, fading in and out with static. But Margaret Hamilton was gone. Lena was just 23 years old, an elementary school teacher who had earned the respect of a small community. More than that, she represented the hopes and dreams of her own family. A young Mexican-American woman achieving professional success in a time and place where it wasn't guaranteed. Her disappearance, with the keys dangling from the ignition and her wallet with cash untouched on the seat, spoke not of robbery, but of a nightmare that walked on two legs. If you're drawn to cases where the truth hides in plain sight for decades, make sure you are subscribed, because this story of betrayal and a 51-year-long search for justice will take us places nobody in Carlinville ever expected to go. The script immediately pivots to the emotional heart of the story, establishing the emotional toll that drives viewer investment. Lena had spent the evening at the Thompson farm, celebrating the harvest season with neighbors in the kind of gathering that defined rural Illinois in those days. Friends remembered her laughing, dancing, and helping Mrs. Thompson wash dishes. She left just before 11 p.m., waving goodbyes and promising to see friends at church the next morning. At home, her younger sister, Sofia Rodriguez, waited for her in their small white house on Elm Street, the house they shared after their parents died 2 years earlier. Sofia sat in the living room, listening to the mantel clock tick past 11:30, then midnight. She told police later that she wasn't worried at first. Sometimes Lena stopped at the all-night diner for coffee with other teachers. But when 1 a.m. came and went, the emotional stakes rose sharply, and Sofia called the sheriff's office. The emotional toll on the Rodriguez family was immediate and devastating, but the community's response added another layer of complexity. They were a family of deep faith and strong community ties, but they felt a distinct lack of urgency from the initial responders, a feeling common to minority families in the 1950s. For decades, Sofia would carry not just the grief of her sister's loss, but the weight of watching the community turn their suspicions outwards towards transient workers, rather than look inward at one of their own. The pain of the unanswered questions became a permanent, agonizing fixture in Sofia's life, a quest for justice that defined her entire adult existence. Deputy Frank Moore drove out alone, following Lena's likely route from the Thompson farm. He found the Chevrolet at 1:45 a.m., parked crooked across the shoulder where County Road 12 curved near the Keller property. He circled the car with his flashlight, calling Lena's name into the darkness. Inside the car, there was no sign of struggle, no blood, no torn fabric. Just an abandoned car, its motor running, and its owner vanished into the November night like smoke. By 3 a.m., Sheriff Thomas Walsh arrived with deputies and began the search. Dawn broke cold and colorless over Carlinville on Sunday morning. By 6 a.m., word had spread through the town of 3,200 souls. Lena taught their children. She played piano at First Methodist. Good families knew good families in towns like this. Sheriff Walsh organized the search with military precision, dividing volunteers into groups of 6. 70 men walked shoulder to shoulder through the harvested cornfields, scanning the frozen ground. They found one crucial clue: Lena's left Oxford shoe, 15 feet from the car, near the drainage ditch. Just one. They never found its match. The county's 2 bloodhounds, borrowed from the state police, tracked Lena's scent from the car to the point where they found her shoe, and then lost the trail completely at the edge of the drainage ditch. The dog circled, whined, and sat down confused. The handler told Walsh it was like she'd vanished into thin air at that exact spot, or been picked up and carried. They searched the Keller barn, the silos, and waded through the drainage ditches, checking culverts big enough to hide a body, finding nothing. They walked the tree line of Morrison's woods, and when the searchers called Lena's name, the sound disappeared and never came back. By Monday, the search expanded to a 5-mile radius. State police arrived with better equipment, interviewing everyone who had attended the Thompson party, building a timeline of Lena's movements. Everyone told the same story. She seemed happy, relaxed, completely normal. The first crack in the investigation, and the first moment of procedural failure, appeared when witness statements began contradicting each other. Henry Du Bois, a mechanic, remembered seeing Lena's powder blue Chevrolet parked near the pumps at Jacobson's filling station on Highway 47 around 10:45 p.m., and she was standing outside the car talking to someone, a man. He'd thought nothing of it at the time, but now with Lena gone, the memory took on a different weight. Then on Wednesday, Sarah Lemoyne came forward. She specifically remembered seeing Lena's Chevrolet, but in her recollection, the car was already past the filling station, heading east on County Road 12, and Lena was definitely alone, with both hands on the wheel. She was certain of the time because she checked her watch. Thursday brought more confusion. Bill Hoffman, a local farmer, had seen Lena's car too, around 11 p.m., but his account differed from both previous statements. According to Hoffman, the Chevrolet was parked on the shoulder of County Road 12, roughly half a mile from where it was eventually found, and the hazard lights were flashing. He saw another vehicle already parked behind hers, someone apparently assisting her, so he'd driven on. He couldn't describe the second vehicle clearly. The memory was hazy. Sheriff Walsh tried to make the timelines work, spreading the county map across his desk, but if Du Bois saw Lena at the station at 10:45 and Lemoyne saw her on County Road 12 at roughly the same time, one of them had to be wrong. The investigation was drowning in contradictions. Every witness meant well, but their memories shifted and changed like sand. Walsh realized they were chasing ghosts, building theories on foundations that wouldn't hold. The one solid fact remained unchanged. Lena Rodriguez's car was found abandoned with its engine running, and she was gone. By the second week, with no solid leads, Sheriff Walsh felt the intense pressure from every direction. The town needed someone to blame, a face for the fear, and the stranger theory emerged almost inevitably. Walsh turned his attention to the transient workers, the drifters who moved through farm country. He focused on the boarding house on Oak Street, compiling a list of 17 names of seasonal workers. He brought them in one by one for questioning. 2 had solid alibis, but the third man, registered under the name James Costa, age approximately 35, had no alibi at all. He'd been walking around town Saturday night, just walking near the fields, near the highway. He couldn't remember specific streets. Walsh held him for 48 hours. State Police Detective Robert Fraser assisted with the interrogation, working Costa in shifts, but his story never changed because it barely existed. They searched his room, found nothing incriminating, and had to let him go. James Costa left Carlinville on the morning bus, and Walsh watched him go with a sick feeling in his stomach that they just released either an innocent man or a guilty one they couldn't prove anything against. The stranger theory fell apart after that. The investigation had lost all momentum, chasing shadows. Thanksgiving came and went. Snow fell on December 1st, covering the fields where they'd searched. Lena's empty desk at Carlinville Elementary remained empty. The case was officially going cold. The years moved forward the way they always do in small towns, slowly and then suddenly. The case of Lena Rodriguez became something people mentioned in hushed tones, a cautionary tale mothers told daughters about being careful on dark roads. Her photograph remained pinned to the bulletin board at the sheriff's office, faded and yellowed, surrounded by newer cases that came and went while hers stayed frozen in time. Sofia Rodriguez never married, never left the White House on Elm Street. She taught second grade for 37 years, retiring in 1994, but people noticed she grew quieter each year, more withdrawn, as if part of her remained stuck in November of 1957, waiting for her sister to come home. She never stopped searching for answers. Every new sheriff who took office heard from Sofia within the first month, politely requesting updates on Lena's case. She wrote letters to the state police, to forensic laboratories, and kept newspaper clippings in a scrapbook, documenting every missing person case in Illinois for 40 years, looking for patterns, looking for connections. The evidence boxes sat in the basement of the sheriff's office. 3 cardboard boxes labeled Rodriguez Lena, missing person November 1957. They survived 2 office renovations, 1 flood, and the transition from paper files to computer databases. Nobody threw them away, but nobody looked at them either. The case was too old, too cold, the witnesses dead or scattered, the physical evidence degraded beyond usefulness. Sheriff Walsh retired in 1973, and his successors occasionally pulled the file when reporters called on slow news days, giving the same statement. The case remained open, but nothing new was happening. The town changed around the memory of Lena Rodriguez. Highway 47 was widened. The Keller barn finally collapsed in a windstorm in 1981, and the Thompson farm was sold to developers who built a subdivision. Most of the people who'd known Lena personally were gone now. Younger residents knew her only as a name, a legend, the school teacher who vanished. Then, spring came to Carlinville in 1962 with the kind of warmth that makes preachers talk about resurrection. Albert Becker, who owned 200 acres east of town, decided that April to expand his southern fence line, pushing his property deeper into the stretch of woods that bordered Morrison's forest, dense acres of oak and hickory that nobody owned or maintained. Becker worked alone, using a post-hole digger, until his shovel hit something that wasn't dirt or rock. He knelt down, brushed away the soil, and saw the curve of bone emerging from the earth. Becker, a former medic, recognized human remains instantly. He drove straight to the sheriff's office and told Deputy Kenneth Murphy what he'd found with a voice that shook. Sheriff Walsh, who had aged considerably in the 5 years since Lena vanished, drove out with the county coroner, Dr. Richard Taylor. The skeleton lay approximately 18 inches below the surface, scattered by time and animals. The remains were human, female, and young, most likely Lena. Walsh felt something collapse inside his chest. He'd carried Lena's case like a stone for 5 years, and here was a body found less than 2 miles from where her car was abandoned, in woods they'd searched back in '57, but not carefully enough. They'd walked past her. The bones went to the State Forensic Laboratory in Springfield. The technology of 1962 was primitive. No DNA testing, no advanced chemical analysis. They had to rely on X-rays and dental records. The forensic examination took 3 weeks, and the report came back inconclusive. The remains were consistent with a young female, time of death consistent with 1957, but the cause of death was undetermined due to decomposition. The pathologist couldn't even confirm damage to the skull occurred before death. Walsh obtained Lena Rodriguez's dental records, but the comparison came back uncertain. Several characteristics matched, but several didn't. The overall condition of the teeth made definitive identification impossible, noting only a probable match, maybe 60% certainty, but nothing they could testify to in court. Walsh drove to Elm Street and sat in Sofia's living room, telling her they'd found remains that might be her sister. The word hung between them like something poisonous. After 5 years of nothing, they had bones that might belong to Lena or might belong to some other young woman. The bones were cataloged as Jane Doe and filed away. Lena Rodriguez remained officially missing, and the case, though reclassified as a homicide, had nowhere to go. The years continued their slow, relentless march. Sofia Rodriguez died quietly in her sleep at age 74 in 2003. The house on Elm Street was sold to a young couple. Every trace of the Rodriguez sisters disappeared, except for a small headstone in Oak Hill Cemetery that read, Lena Rodriguez, beloved sister, 1934 to 1957, gone but not forgotten. The case remained officially open, but by 2005, it was ancient history. Enter Detective Lawrence Gallagher. He retired from the Illinois State Police in 2006 after 32 years of service, but retirement didn't bring the peace he'd expected. He couldn't stop thinking about Lena's case, which had crossed his desk back in 1989 during a routine audit. He'd spent 2 weeks reading the reports and felt convinced the original investigation had missed something fundamental. He tried to reopen the case officially then, but was overruled. Now, he had time, and he used it. Gallagher started visiting the Carlinville Sheriff's Department, convincing Sheriff Daniel Murphy that modern forensic technology could finally answer questions that were impossible in 1962. DNA testing had revolutionized criminal investigation, but it required funding and approval. Gallagher championed the case with the persistence of someone who believed justice delayed was not justice denied, only justice waiting. He argued that the bones deserve a name, and that Sofia Rodriguez deserved to know the truth, even though she had died still hoping. The breakthrough finally came in 2008 when the state allocated funding for a cold case DNA initiative. Lena Rodriguez's case made the list largely because of Gallagher's tireless advocacy. The bones were transported to the State Forensic Laboratory in Chicago and handled by Dr. Sarah Kennedy, a forensic anthropologist. She worked with mitochondrial DNA, the genetic material passed through the maternal line that survives in bones and teeth long after nuclear DNA has degraded. The process took 4 months, complicated by the age of the samples. The preliminary report arrived in September. Dr. Kennedy had successfully extracted a mitochondrial profile. Now, they needed a comparison sample from a maternal relative. Since Sofia was gone, the search expanded to cousins. They found Eleanor Walsh, Sofia's first cousin, living in a retirement community in Peoria. She was 81, but clearly remembered Lena and the desperate years of searching. Eleanor agreed to provide a DNA sample, a simple cheek swab. The match came back positive in November 2008. Probability of maternal relationship at 99.7%. The unidentified remains found in Morrison's Woods in 1962 were definitively Lena Rodriguez. She'd been dead since 1957, buried exactly where dozens of searchers had walked without knowing she was beneath their feet. Sheriff Murphy held a press conference on a cold December morning with Gallagher beside him. Lena Rodriguez had a name again. The investigation was officially reclassified as an active homicide case. Both men knew that after 51 years, the chances of finding her killer were microscopically small, but they had to try. The reopened investigation meant going through everything again, every piece of paper, every statement taken in 1957. Gallagher set up a workspace and spread the case files across 3 tables, reading reports he'd read before, looking for details that might mean something different now, patterns that only became visible with distance and time. The resolution was coming, but the shocking truth was still buried deep within those files. The case had a name again, but the identity of the killer remained buried in the past. Detective Gallagher, fueled by the positive DNA match, continued to work methodically, reading reports he'd read before, looking for the flaw, the overlooked detail buried beneath decades of paperwork and institutional frustration. He found on a Thursday afternoon in January of 2009. Gallagher was working his way through the 3rd cardboard box, box number 3, labeled Hamilton Margaret, missing person November 1957, when he found the letter. It was filed at the very bottom, underneath witness statements and evidence logs. The envelope was yellowed, addressed to Sheriff Thomas Walsh, and postmarked December 3rd, 1958, over a year after Lena vanished. It had been opened and read, then filed away and forgotten. The letter was handwritten in careful block capitals, the kind of disguised penmanship people use when they don't want their identity revealed. It was brief, only 1 paragraph, but Gallagher read it 3 times and felt the hair rise on his arms. The writer, identifying themselves only as a concerned citizen, claimed to have information about Lena's disappearance. The letter stated that on the night Lena vanished, she was seen having what appeared to be an argument with someone she knew well, someone the community trusted and respected, near the old grain storage facility on Route 12, shortly after 11 p.m. The writer didn't provide a name, but ended with a cryptic warning. Ask about why he left town so suddenly. Ask about the lie he told his wife. There was no indication that Sheriff Walsh had ever followed up on this letter. It was likely dismissed as another false tip during those first terrible, desperate months. But something about the specificity bothered Gallagher. This wasn't a psychic vision or a report of a stranger. This was someone with actual knowledge describing a specific incident at a specific location, involving someone Lena knew. The forgotten letter was the unexpected detail that completely shifted the understanding of the case. Gallagher brought the letter to Sheriff Murphy. If Lena was seen arguing with someone she knew near the grain facility, less than half a mile from where her car was found, and that someone was a trusted community member who left town suddenly, there had to be a record. They needed to trace who disappeared from Carlinville in late 1957 or early 1958. Gallagher started with the newspaper archives, compiling a list of everyone who moved away during that period. He cross-referenced this list against the original witness statements, looking for anyone who'd been at the Thompson party or lived nearby. The list narrowed to 8 names, men who might have known Lena well enough for her to stop and talk to them on a dark road. One name appeared twice, Richie Jensen. In 1957, Richie Jensen was 34 years old, the respected owner of Jensen Insurance on Main Street. He was married to Helen. They had 2 young daughters, and he was an active member of the town council, coaching Little League and organizing the annual 4th of July parade. People liked him. People trusted him. He had been at the Thompson party the night Lena disappeared, leaving around 10:30 p.m. with his wife, a fact confirmed by multiple witnesses. His name appeared in the original investigation files only as an attendee, nothing more. But in February of 1958, just 3 months after Lena vanished, Jensen Insurance closed suddenly. Richie told people his father was ill in Springfield, and he needed to relocate to help run the family's other store. The explanation seemed reasonable, and nobody questioned it. The Jensen family moved away on a cold Tuesday morning, and within a week, it was as if they'd never lived in Carlinville at all. Gallagher found Richie Jensen still living in Springfield in 2009, now 86 years old, residing in an assisted living facility with late-stage Parkinson's disease. His wife, Helen, had died in 2004. Gallagher approached carefully, arranging for Sheriff Murphy and a social worker to be present, ensuring everything was recorded. Richie Jensen sat in a wheelchair, his hands trembling. Gallagher introduced himself and showed him the photograph of Lena Rodriguez from 1957. Richie stared at the picture for a long time, tears forming slowly, and said in a voice barely above a whisper that he'd been waiting for this conversation for 51 years. He confessed over the course of 3 interviews spanning 2 weeks. He had known Lena since she started teaching, and he'd developed feelings he couldn't explain or control. The night of the Thompson party, he had watched her, and something broke inside him. He drove home, took his wife there, and then told her he had to drive back to the store, claiming he'd forgotten to lock the safe. Instead, he drove back toward the Thompson farm, found Lena's Chevrolet, and flagged her down by standing in the middle of the road. Lena, seeing the trusted community member, had stopped and pulled over. They stood near the drainage ditch, and he confessed everything. The feelings, the obsession. Lena had been kind even in her rejection, gently telling him she didn't share his feelings and that he was a married man. She turned to get back in her car. In a blind rage, Walter snapped. He grabbed her, tried to kiss her, and when she pushed him away, he struck her once, hard enough that she fell and hit her head on the edge of the drainage ditch. He believed she died there. Panic consumed him. He dragged her body into his truck, drove deep into Morrison's woods on an old logging road, and buried her in the soft soil. He drove her Chevrolet back to County Road 12, left it running with the door open to stage an abduction, and threw one of her shoes into the grass. Then he walked the 2 miles back to his truck, reached home before midnight, climbed into bed beside Helen, and lived with what he'd done for 51 years. The arrest came on March 7, 2009, 51 years, 3 months, and 21 days after Lena Rodriguez drove away from the Thompson farm for the last time. Richie Jensen was taken into custody at the assisted living facility, transported in a wheelchair van to the county jail on charges of first-degree murder. The news exploded through Carlinville like a bomb detonating in the center of town. Richie Jensen, who sold them insurance, coached their sons, and smiled at them every Sunday morning, was the killer. Older residents remembered his hardware store, remembered thinking what a tragedy it was when they moved away so suddenly. The younger generation understood the magnitude. Someone they trusted had murdered a woman and let the entire town search for her, all while knowing exactly where she was buried. Gallagher's investigation uncovered the second name 3 weeks later, Raymond Douglas, Walter's closest friend. Raymond, now 79, broke when state police knocked on his door. He admitted he'd known since the beginning. Walter had come to him the morning after Lena disappeared, and Raymond had helped him dig deeper, cover the grave more thoroughly, and scatter leaves to hide the disturbed earth. Raymond was charged as an accessory after the fact and sentenced to 5 years, suspended due to age and health. Richie Jensen never stood trial. His attorney negotiated a plea agreement where Walter provided a full confession in exchange for the certainty that he'd die in a medical facility rather than a prison. He died 4 months later in the hospice wing of the Sangamon County Medical Center. The death certificate listed the cause as pneumonia, but the unofficial cause was 51 years of carrying a secret that poisoned everything he touched. Carlinville held a memorial service for Lena Rodriguez in November of 2009, 52 years after she disappeared. The entire town attended, filling First Methodist Church beyond capacity. The pastor spoke about justice delayed, but not denied, and about the importance of never giving up on the truth. He spoke about Sofia Rodriguez, who died never knowing her sister's fate. Lena was finally laid to rest in Oak Hill Cemetery beside Sofia. The case file was officially closed, stamped solved, archived in the basement where it had waited for 51 years. Carlinville learned the hardest lesson small towns ever learn, that monsters don't always come from outside. Sometimes they live next door, sell you insurance, coach your children, and smile at you every Sunday morning in church. What is the most shocking detail to you? The anonymous letter or the betrayal by a trusted community member? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe for more updates on cold cases where justice was delayed but never denied. Your support helps us keep these vital stories in the spotlight.